If you only have 1 minute, just 1 minute, when you get time, look up white willow bark and longevity, or white willow bark and anti-aging in Mr. Google. And once you do that, I'm pretty sure that you'll come back here to find out what else you can about white willow bark. Now, there was a major publication that came out in January of 2019 from a group in Canada. There's a very talented group of about 10 people at Concordia University. Vladimir Titorenko is one of the leading investigators there. We can find him on YouTube. They interviewed him, I think, in 2016. And he really made an effort to break it down for those of us that don't know all the exact precise technical terms, to understand what's going on here using yeast as a proxy for lifespan in people, where the yeast may typically live, 3, 4, 5 days, but with certain combinations of stress, with like calorie restriction or the application of certain plant compounds, sometimes these yeast, instead of living 3, 4, 5, 6 days, they'll live 40 days, 45 days, or that would be their maximum. And then their average would be maybe around, for the best one, around 30 days. So still, this is a substantial increase in lifespan. Now, what this publication also did was they were building on work over 4 or 5 years earlier, where they had narrowed down a base of over 100,000 with some kind of robot, probably some kind of machine learning, and then they narrowed it down till eventually they got to 6 compounds that work together with each other. So I want to talk a little bit about his 2019 January publication. Then in October of that year, he came out with a publication about white willow bark, just devoted to white willow bark. And then this year, in 2020, they've had a publication about 15 plant herbal extracts that have additional life extension properties. And so let's get right into this. The 6 herbs. What I did was, since they showed in the graphs and the charts the mean lifespan extension and the maximum. So here's an example of what I'm talking about here. Now we can see in the green would be the green is the maximum, and then like over here we can see the mean and the maximum. So you can see from the control, which is the top one, to the maximum, there's quite an extension. Now the example I selected here is this is the white willow bark plus resveratrol. So what I did was since they showed the mean and they showed the maximum, I took the mean and the maximum and added them together. And that just gives me like a rough guide of the magnitude. And this was just to get started examining these different herbs and, learning about them, what the dosages have been typically used, for other diseases or maladies or illnesses. So anyway, here's the chart of when I added the mean to the maximum. Now you can see at the very top, the white willow bark plus resveratrol. Then below that is the, I think that's passion flower. Yeah, resveratrol plus passion flower. Now also within the first, what stood out to me quickly was in the first 5 things here, top 5, white willow bark was in 3 of them. And then in the top 5, resveratrol was in 3 of them. Now it turns out that if you go through the study carefully, the resveratrol by itself doesn't have a major impact, although it does have some, but it really has an impact synergistically working together. So now this is on record, this little methodology I worked out to try and get started. This is just to get started examining these things. Now it turns out many of these things, I've been using the resveratrol for probably, 20 years. Some of it based on the early research of David Sinclair. And now the resveratrol, that's interesting. I got to a point in my workouts when I had a pretty difficult job. Some days it was really physically demanding, and I was tired. And but I needed to do these certain leg exercises because of my arthritis. If I didn't do those exercises 2 or 3 times a week, boy, where it was bone on my knee, it would really start to ache. It was a particular specific ache that wouldn't go away. But as soon as I did the exercises, it would go away. So I had to get in there, and it was hard sometimes. So I'd heard so many good things about resveratrol. I tried it at I got a good brand, took it according to instructions, and sure enough, my workouts got almost effortless. It made a big difference. It was almost like I could work out for an hour and a half, pretty strenuous, and then I would stop because I was getting bored. But my energy level increased quite a bit. Now, at the time, also, I was experimenting with passion flower. I was working shift work. Sometimes I'd work the 11 to 7 shift, 3 to 11 shift, and, it messes up your sleep at shift work. So I was experimenting with passion flower, which is one of the ones here. The black cohosh, I never did, but I know that at the time, a lot of women were using that for the hot flashes from menopause. The valerian extract, I was experimenting with that for sleeping. It's got a terrible smell, but it helps. I was actually growing it. At the time, I had a townhouse with a small yard, so I was growing the valerian and then drying it in the rafters of the basement in the winter. Then celery seed extract is another one, which I've always liked the flavor of the celery seeds. So I have celery seeds and I grind them up in a little coffee grinder to use as a spice. And I never did get a hold of the spermidine. They use the spermidine similar to the resveratrol to work synergistically. The ginkgo biloba, I've been taking that for probably 30 years to help with brain health. I know Dr. Aman, who's been on the PBS specials about brain health. He he says that when they've examined the brains on autopsies, those people who had been using the ginkgo had less damage. So I've covered the 6 herbs. That would be the white willow bark, the passion flower, the black cohosh, the valerian, the celery seed extract, and the ginkgo. So I've covered that. And people can look these all up if they make the decision, right? I'm not encouraging anybody. I'm not a doctor. I'm just providing information. This isn't medical advice. If you make the decision to try these things, it's your decision, and by all means try them at a low dose. Make sure you don't have a allergy or sensitivity. I've never had any problem with any of these extracts. I get them in different forms. I try to make sure and get a high quality, preferably it's been third party tested. I also use the tinctures. The tinctures are easier to use sometimes. And also I took these 7 compounds and made them into a liposomal formula, which where liposomal makes it much more bioavailable. And after the end of my little talk here, I'm going to show a video making the formula. And so this is where some of the major breakthroughs in aging are. Now this is the publication in January 2019. Well, I actually printed this out twice, and then both times, spent time studying the different graphs and charts. And I suggest people get familiar with this. This isn't a lecture. This isn't a course. You're not going to get graded. But this group of people are very talented. They're very familiar with the Chinese research, the traditional Chinese medicine, and I've spent quite a bit of time looking through different Chinese medical herbal formulas, and they've got great scientists in China, just like they do in many countries. And one of the things I noticed, I was looking up CPOD, I think about 2 years ago, and these scientists, the incidence of COPD had increased from around 8% to 13% over a 10-year period, which is an astronomical increase. So, I figured that they're making sure some of their best scientists are devoting their time and effort to this. And one of the publications I came across, they were examining an ancient formula. I think it had like 15 to 20 different herbs. They usually take them 3 or 4 times a day. And I could kind of tell that the research scientists were a little bit in awe of this formula because there were some alkaloids in the formula that were toxic. And yet there were other herbs in the formula that didn't actually have anything to do with COPD, but they neutralized the toxic alkaloids. There were some very talented people years ago. Who knows, it may go back to when our brains were 10% bigger. And I know a lot of people don't like to talk about that, especially some of the really well-educated scientists with PhDs. And they like to think that we're the smartest, we've ever been. Well, not necessarily. I mean, at a certain time, evolution, natural selection, probably the development of these really intricate tools with all the flaking, and then the attachment of them to different spearheads with different compounds, and the Neanderthals had some very, very effective compounds. I'm not sure if they were using the resins of different like pines and stuff, but they had different compounds for attaching their very well-developed flint blades, to different pieces of wood. These people were very smart and very talented. If you've ever come across a group of people that were doing this type of thing, and I went to one of these wilderness things, and I tried to talk to some of the guys there that were flaking, napping. They were napping their flaked points, sharpened tools for their arrow. They were getting their own pieces of wood, making their own arrows, making their own bows. And I tried to talk to some of them at this wilderness conference about something that I figured they would be glad to talk about. Well, I could tell, because they were in the middle of napping something. And while we were talking, I could see they just were dying to get back to creating their masterpiece. With their, I'm not sure, they use pieces of bone and some leather on the lap. It's an artist at work here. So I didn't press that at all. You have to understand when people they got their mind on something, they want to get back to it. So I think that's pretty interesting though about they can measure the size of the skulls with the Cro-Magnon and the Neanderthal. They get these little glass beads and pour them into the empty skull until it's filled up, and then they take these little beads and empty them into a beaker, and then they can measure the actual volume inside of the brain. I think the 2 biggest skulls they ever found were the Neanderthal. But the average skull size of the Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal was about 10% bigger on average than our skull size today. And it's been steadily getting smaller. So I have these theories that possibly some of the plants we use came from, were passed down historically. And a lot of the spices, the herbal spices we used, like oregano and rosemary, they have some really substantial beneficial properties. So there, I went off on a little tangent here, But I think that makes it more personable. That's part of it. I don't edit my videos. I make it from start to finish. You get the flaws, the weaknesses, when I can't quite remember some things. But I think it makes it more personable. And we need that with the age of the internet and all the social media. We need to talk to each other face to face, see each other smile, see each other be sad. So I encourage people to. Oh, that's another thing. When I went keto, that made a big difference on my personality because I started feeling the best I'd ever felt in my life. I mean, including probably when I was a child. I just felt so good all the time. I didn't need to go out and run 10 miles to feel good, which I went through for years. Where the only way I really felt good was to do some really hard, strenuous exercise. And it turns out it was the food. If I just eliminated a certain types of groups of foods, especially the refined seed oils and all the carbs, that I just felt good. So when you feel good, you enjoy talking to people and learning about other cultures and you know. So I really in the sauna. What there were three guys one day in the sauna. They were what's that group in Afghanistan? The Pashtun, but they were from Pakistan. But you could tell right away these three guys were hardcore. Like it wasn't like one of them was the leader and the other ones would kind of no. All three of them were. If they had something to say, they were going to say it. And the Pashtun culture is fascinating because if you come into one of their villages, that's why I have friends of mine there. They have friends in Great Britain that were in the special forces. And they actually go to Afghanistan on vacations with their family. Because if you get into a Pashtun village, and you always want to get in there during the daytime, because there's bandits out in the countryside, but they're obligated by their culture, and they really mean it, that they will defend you with their life if necessary. And they mean it. This isn't just some cultural thing that's nice to talk about. So anyway, the Pashtun, and I bump into people from all these different countries, all over the place, from especially the people that had a ride on La Bestia, the beast. La Bestia es muy peligrosa. Mucho valor. Mucho valor is much courage. And then I thought in the desert it was like maybe 4 or 5 days or something. So I talked to this group once at one of the local restaurants where it's a really good deal there. It's a buffet. You can eat all you want. So, no, they said like ocho dias, 8 or 10 days in the desert. Oh my gosh, 8 or 10 days. Oh, so that's when I said mucho valor, muy peligrosa. And I talked a little bit about La Bestia, the beast. That's the train they ride from Guatemala. Sometimes it takes them 2 months because they have to get off at all the checkpoints, get off and walk around. Mexico's got checkpoints frequently, and then when they go through certain districts, the first thing that you have to do when you get to Coyote, and one of the guys, it's about $7,000 now, is you have to ask him, did you pay the drug cartel their fee for traveling through their area? I think it's like $200 or $300, and they have spotters out there, watching. Because if you don't pay your fee, the drug cartel at a certain point is going to set an example, And that's where they found that one mass grave. I think that was like 60 or 70 people. That's I think it's Los Zetas. There's a couple of them there. But see, I went off track here a little bit. But I think this helps make these things more personable. Now, the other publication in 2019 by Vladimir Titorenko and his group at Concordia University. I think there's 9 other people on this publication. This is specifically about white willow bark. We have recently found that PE21 That's white willow bark. I suggest you start memorizing the different numbers. Now this is phenomenal information to have. An extract from the white willow bark, Salix alba, slows chronological aging and prolongs longevity of the yeast Saccharomyces cerevisiae. And then they list 3 different mechanisms by which they do this. Its ability to decrease the intracellular concentration of free fatty acids. The second one is the ability to decrease the concentrations of triacylglycerol and to increase the concentration of clyophospholipid within the endoplasmic reticulum membranes. I'm not sure if trioglycerols or triglycerides. Gotta look that one up. That would be interesting if that lowers triglycerides, because the triglyceride HDL ratio, that's an extremely valuable ratio for determining your heart risk and your diabetes risk. And you can raise the HDL by getting exercise, and you can lower the triglycerides by reducing the carbohydrates. And that's got a risk factor value much greater than cholesterol or LDL. Actually, a lot of the tools online that measure your heart, they don't use LDL or cholesterol at all. They may ask for your CRP, family history, your triglycerides, your HDL. Now, I think the risk factor of cholesterol is 1.0, which means actually, because you multiply it by 1, is actually, and LDL, I think it's 1.01. I got that from a presentation by Ivor Cummins. And I think the risk factor for your omega-3 index is 6 or 7. I think I got that from Dr. Paul Mason. And your risk factor for insulin or hyperinsulinemia is around 6 or 7. So you see the difference in risk. That's why I'm when I see triglycerides, I pay close attention, because that's a valuable risk factor. The third mechanism underlying aging is the ability to change lipid concentrations in the mitochondrial membranes. And if you want to learn a lot about the mitochondrial membranes and the different complexes, with the ECR, electron transport chain, Peter, the hyperlipid has in-depth, and the comments sections are phenomenal. They have some really capable people come to his blog. I call it Peter's Place. He's got one of those really long Polish names. I'll try. Petro Bromolisiak. I'm sure I'm not even close. Okay, so that's the publication on white willow bark from late 2019. Okay, now here's the newest. Well, actually, they've had a couple publications in 2020, but this is the one that I've reviewed pretty, I can't really say thoroughly, but I've spent 2 or 3 times going through it. So now of the 15 extracts, they found 13 were recognized as safe by a Canadian government health agency. And of those, 8 were actually included in an index of recommended herbs, where they list the dosage, the possible side effects. So I made a list of those 8 herbs that are approved by this Canadian government health agency. I didn't have time to find the 5 that are listed as safe but not listed as, and the 2 that are not listed as safe. Haven't had time to find them. But anyway, here's a list of this is a good place where I can say I'm not selling anything. I'm not making a product. I have no affiliation with any corporation. I'm not a merchant. I'm not a salesman. We're in the midst of a crisis here, and when we're in a crisis, I think people like me come forward. I feel obligated. I mean, this is my way of looking out for my fellow man. But in a situation like this, for those people who start following me, don't send me money, right? In all seriousness, the reason that I started making the modified citrus pectin liposomal was because my budget I was at a limit with my budget, with my Social Security and my pension. I had a pretty decent union job, but I was at the very limit. So I made this formula liposomal, and then it turns out that it looks like the modified citrus pectin and Hinokio really respond well to liposomal. It makes them much more effective. So otherwise, if I had had another couple $100 in my budget, I wouldn't have tried that. Right? You get in this mindset sometimes where you just figure, well, all these experts at all these companies, they have all these resources, so, if it's going to help liposomal, they've probably tried it. You just get in thinking that way, or I know a lot of us use it. Well, the doctor knows best. They had that thing about Dr. Oz where he only half of his suggestions actually have evidence. And then some professor from Duke did an analysis and said, well, when you go to a doctor, only less than one quarter of what they tell you has evidence. I have a doctor say things like calorie in, calorie out, get more exercise. And what's the other one? All things in moderation, right? I mean, those are the three battle cries of the soda companies. That's what their Madison Avenue advertising firms, their public relations firms came up with as a way to keep people from pointing to all the fructose and the sugar in sodas that were doing all this damage, So, like they say, all things in moderation, like you can drink 2 or 3 Cokes a day, calorie in, calorie out. It doesn't matter what you do, it all works the same. It doesn't, oh man, is that off? What you eat affects like 80 different hormones in your body. And then the third one is get more exercise. See, so now it's back on us. It's our problem. It's not the soda company. They didn't do this. It's us. So anyway, so those are the 8. I haven't, I'm just in the stage of investigating these. Now, I'll talk about them, some of them a little bit. The salt palmetto, that's the first one, Serena repens, berries. I've used that for probably 15 years to try and protect my prostate. The other one is holy basil. I'm starting to grow that out because the tea made with the leaves is delicious. It's really, I'm starting to grow that out, and where I can find empty patches I'm actually using some of the homeowners association land, but I talked to some because I cleared the poison ivy patch. Boy, was that an effort. Wow. It must have taken me a month and a half. You could just clear a few feet every day and then get away from it before I wore long rubber gloves, up to my, and eventually I got it though. But actually I found jewelweed is fabulous for poison ivy. I mean, it's 1,000 times better than anything in the store. It'll get rid of the itching in a couple hours. And by the next morning, the running will stop. When the poison ivy runs with that yellow white. Well, I found this formula I actually got things to try and experiment on mosquito bites. And like I said, I'm not selling anything, but I tried this and it really works great for the poison ivy. Much better than the calamine lotion or all these other things my mother used to use. So anyway, so I'm growing the holy basil. Now the third one is European goldenrod, Solidago virgaria, whole plant. I'm not familiar with that one. I have to learn about it. The fourth one is Citrus sinensis fruit. That's sweet orange. So of course you have to get an extract, otherwise it's too much sugar. So I got to look into that. The fifth one is Vitis vinifera. That's the common grape. That's the skins of the common grape. There's grape. I've been using grape extract for probably 5 or 6 years. But the sixth one is golden seal, Hydrastis canadensis. Now, if that's the one I think it is, it should be blooming now. I've made tea from the leaves. That's pretty. It's a tasty tea. So but I got to make sure that that's the one, Hydrastis canadensis. This was like 3 or 4 years ago that I made the tea. That's when I had tried. I was trying all these different plants, from reading books about wild plants that we can eat. I tried stinging nettle. We have to handle it with gloves. Well, probably the Indians used to just handle it with leaves from another plant. And as soon as you put it in a pot, you cook it similar to spinach. It's within 15 seconds of it hitting I just left a light layer of water in the pot heated it up with a little bit of water, poured the water out. As soon as the stinging nettle hits the hot metal, the acids are neutralized. It's no longer stinging. But boy, is it rich. It's just packed with nutrients. And then to find it, most of the really good patches, I found that some of them along some of the rivers in Baltimore here, the little gunpowder, no, it was a big gunpowder. But when I got there, I was too late because a lot of people from other countries, I think it's mostly the Koreans, they know how good these plants are, and they snip off all the top little tender stems. But then I found some other patches way downstream, hard to get into. But and then I actually moved 3 or 4 of the plants and transplanted them in a little woods near where I lived at the time. So that's now the seventh one is fenugreek, Trigonella femum gracem, fenugreek, and then the 8th one is yerba mate, Ilex paraguarensis whole plant. Now, I think that makes a tasty tea. I haven't tried it yet. So these are all new. If people want to follow me and join in, then see if you can find the 5, which are the 5 that are recognized as safe, but not recommended for medicinal use, and then find the 2 that are not recognized as safe of these 15 herbs. So this is way, like if you want to follow me, don't send me money, but help out to make this a team effort. Okay, so I think that that covers the 3 papers I wanted to cover today. The major works of, or some of the major works of Vladimir Titorenko out of the Concordia University in Canada. And I hope that people, benefit from this information. And I hope you make some comments, give a thumbs up or give a thumbs down, subscribe if you think that, this information is valuable. And hopefully I'll see you next time. Hello there. This is going to be a video of how to make a liposomal formula based on the research of Vladimir Titorenko. There's going to be 6 herbs. We'll start with willow bark extract, white willow bark. Then we're going to have valerian and passion flower. And there's going to be ginkgo biloba. And there's going to be celery seed extract. And then there's going to be black cohosh. Those are the 6 main herbs. And then I'll add some things to help stabilize and prevent oxidation. Vitamin C crystals, cherry acerola, L-ascorbate, and some green tea. I'm going to add some cinnamon, Ceylon cinnamon, and blend them all together. And then separately I'll blend sunflower lecithin with the same amount. And then after those two are blended separately, I'll combine the two and blend together. So I'm going to put some ice cubes in the blender, make sure the water's nice and cold, and then I'll weigh them out on a gram scale. Okay. And now I'm going to stop the video because it's kind of boring watching me weigh out these things, and come back in a minute. Okay, I've completed the blend weighing of the different compounds, and I also put some trans resveratrol. There's 4 grams of trans resveratrol, 100%. There are 1,200 milligrams of the white willow bark, 900 milligrams of the passion flower, 800 milligrams of the valerian root, 360 milligrams of the ginkgo biloba, 325 milligrams of the celery seed, which is 85% BNB. There's 600 milligrams of the black cohosh. And like I said, with the trans resveratrol, which resveratrol works synergistically with these herbs, and several of them, they work synergistically with each other. This works by a hormetic mechanism. It's similar to the way we build up muscles, where we put a strain or stress on the muscles. We damage them, actually, and then the body says, oh, I better make the muscles bigger and stronger. So these herbs have a similar impact on certain aging pathways. So it's not necessarily more is better. So by no means, this isn't medical advice. This is just educational. I'm not a doctor. This is just to give an idea of where to get started in investigating and looking into this. So I also added for stabilization, cherry acerola, 3 grams, green tea extract, 300 milligrams, the Ceylon cinnamon, 500 milligrams, L-ascorbate, 500 milligrams. I added a few other things that are specialized for my own, I have autoimmune disorders. But otherwise, that's the compounds going into this, with the 6 main ones are the herbs, and then the trans resveratrol. Now I'm going to put these in this cooler I put ice in there and make sure the water's nice and cold. You want to try to reduce oxidation, and then I'll put this, blend this for maybe 2 minutes, and then I will weigh out the sunflower lecithin separately. It's 17.5 grams. And then I'll blend that in cool water. And then after I blend that, then I'll combine the two of them and blend them together. And then after that, they go into a glass jar. I'll put them in this glass jar, and this will go in the water bath in the ultrasonic jewelry cleaner, which is, this isn't really chemistry, it's just mixing. It's just basic mixing of things. Just be careful when you weigh them out. Make sure you got a gram scale. These scales are like $15, $20. And okay, I'm going to turn this off while I do the blending. Okay, I've finished blending the different herbs in the resveratrol. Now I've weighed out the sunflower lecithin, 17.5 grams. I'll put this in the blender with clean fresh water, not tap water. It needs to be fresh. And just a few little tips here. If you've never used supplements or herbs like this, always check each one individually at a real low dosage, and make sure there's not some kind of allergy or sensitivity. and study up on the herbs. Become familiar with it. I mean, if you're all stressed out, if you're all anxious, apprehensive, that's going to interfere with the effectiveness. I mean, stress is not a good thing. I actually get some of my ideas from the works of Alexander Shulgin, who's the fellow that discovered all these psychedelic drugs. I mean, he's like a super chemist. I think he discovered like 180 of them. And he had been a chemist beforehand, I think at DuPont or somewhere. But he would always check things at a real low dose just to make sure. And sure enough, some of these things that he examined, they had an effect, a psychedelic effect at a very low dose. So that's what I'm suggesting here is don't be reckless with any of this. And this is not medical advice. I'm not a doctor. You have to be responsible for investigating this and learning about it. These herbs, they have very few side effects. That's the reason I'm using them. And many of them being used for thousands of years, possibly tens of thousands of years, possibly back when our brains were about 10% bigger. That was the Cro-Magnon and the Neanderthal. And we all have a little bit of Neanderthal in us. Their brains were quite substantial. They conceivably could have been 50% or 100% more intelligent than we are. I know that might be disturbing news even for well-educated scientists, PhDs. They don't like to think about things like that, times when we were really smart. Okay, so I'm going to turn the video off while I blend the sunflower lecithin. Okay, the sunflower lecithin is blended now. So I'll add the herbal mixture. This actually doesn't taste too bad with the cinnamon. I think I got some of my ideas on the cinnamon from Vince Giuliano, Giuliano. He has a website, Anti-Aging Firewalls. And after using an autoimmune formula for 4 or 5 years, he's now got a product which I have no financial ties to, but he's using curcumin, boswellia, ginger, and ashwagandha. And there's some really interesting herbs. So I'm going to turn this blender on for a couple minutes. Okay, the blending is complete. So I'll put this into a glass jar. I got some wooden stirrers. I just used some chopsticks while it's in the ultrasonic jewelry cleaner for about 35 minutes. I will stir it periodically with the chopsticks. Okay. There we go. It didn't overflow. I think I checked it beforehand to make sure the level was right. Okay, this is going to make a wee bit of a racket here. Well, let me get the chopsticks so everything is visual. So it doesn't, I don't want to make it any more confusing than, because it really isn't that confusing. It's just become familiar with these things. So I just stir it like that. And then here's the ice here. Water's nice and cool. And this will run for 35 minutes, and then I'll weigh it out. I'll take this twice a day. earlier in the day because the resveratrol seems to energize me a little bit, and I want to make sure it doesn't interfere with my sleep. And most of the things I take 3 times a day, but this particular formula I'll take twice. So I'll weigh it out, the total volume, and then I'll divide that by, 2 weeks? It's 14 times 2 is 28. So I'll divide the total weight by 28, and that'll tell me how much each dosage will be. And I used to just make enough for a week, but I want to get up to like a month for, it's easier logistically, but I want to make sure that there's no off flavor or off taste, that there's some oxidation going on. So I also will add a few drops of geranium essential oil and rosemary essential oil at the very end, and that will also help stabilize the mixture and slow down oxidation. Okay, so I'll turn off the camera now for a while this. Oh, one more. I'll pour it into I wish I could find glass, but I'll pour it into a container like this, which has it makes it easier to work with when you want to weigh it out, so you don't waste a lot or you don't spill it. I got some painting markers, the oil base. So this is T for Titorenko, because otherwise even those waterproof markers, they wear off pretty quick, and then I get confused which is which. Okay, let me turn this off now. Okay, the mixture is almost finished blending in the ultrasonic jewelry cleaner. It's been about 35 minutes. So now I add a couple drops of geranium essential oil, a couple drops of rosemary essential oil. Okay, and then after this I'm going to weigh it out on a gram scale, see how much I have. Okay. Okay, so I wound up with 482 grams. So I need that divided by 28 for, Alexa, what's 482 divided by 28?
482 divided by 28 is 17.2143.
So I'm going to take 17 grams per dose, twice a day. And here I've got my container ready to pour this into. Now, if it didn't all fit, then I would just leave some in the jar, mark it, so I don't get confused, put it in the refrigerator. So there, like I said, I use one of these markers that are a little bit more permanent than the regular. Now this is going to be 17. Okay. Oh, I just wanted to say about the cinnamon. The reason I used the Ceylon cinnamon is I went through all the other cinnamons. There's like 4 or 5 other types of cinnamon from Vietnam and all these different countries, and all of them have a slight amount of compound in them that's damaging to the liver. And it's not, I mean, you have to take quite a bit, but I just don't want to take a chance at all. So that's why I get this Ceylon cinnamon, which is more expensive, of course. But, you know, in case you go really overboard, you know, you just You just don't want to have that lingering concern. Okay, so that's it. Thanks for listening and watching.